Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard emerges with people from all walks of life who, through their own unique angle, succeed and flourish. Enjoy the ride and welcome to Unique Ways, an audio podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really great guest on today, and I'll describe him briefly. He's a partner in ECD at Rethink, AdAge's Creative Agency of the Year, one of Fast Company's top 10 most innovative creative agencies, and Canada's top creative and design agency 5 years in a row and counting. Please join me in welcoming Hans Thiessen. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Thomas. Pleasure to be here.
Ready for 20 questions?
Let's dive right into it.
Great. Question one. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
So there's a long-standing joke that I tell people when they ask what do I do, and I generally say that my long convoluted job title is partner and executive creative director, but that all really just boils down to being the cheerleader of all things design and rethink. So my job essentially is to empower others to create work that they never dreamed possible. So that takes a number of different forms in any different day, but that's ultimately my goal, my aim in my role.
Perfect. Question two. What's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Honestly, I think it's almost unknowledge, but being able to be okay with being the stupidest person in the room is the thing that helps set me apart more often than not. And I don't just say that in a cheeky, self-deprecating way, but honestly, coming in with curiosity and naivety, just a willingness to see where things could go is honestly sometimes more of a superpower than a knock against me. And something that, yeah, helps me continue to stay curious and creative, even though I might have more years under my belt than when I started out. Just coming in with that sort of approach of not knowing everything allows the wisdom of others to help influence the work.
Great. And just a quick note for the audience, if you guys are interested in Vancouver episodes, but other kinds of episodes, check out our recent episode with Paul Wong. That was a great one. Question three. Why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
That's a great question, and some days I honestly don't know. Um, yeah, if I had to give you maybe a short answer, it'd just be I've always loved typography ever since a young age. I remember looking at the Cheerios box and not really seeing the letters, but seeing the spaces between them and being like, oh, that one, the E looks like it's a spoon holding an egg. So I've always just had this fascination rather with typography. And I think part of that was born out of being sort of a quiet guy who wasn't ever really confident to speak up for himself. Typography gave me this ability to say things in powerful ways without actually needing to open my mouth. So just that idea of visual communication always interested me about design. That kind of coupled with, I don't know if you can tell from my exotic accent, but I'm originally from Calgary.
Hmm.
So the home of oil and gas, everything. And so coming through high school, it was kind of just assumed that everyone who's good at math becomes an engineer and goes into the oil and gas industry. And so, yeah, I was better at math than other things. And so that was kind of just the path that was charted for me. But, saw this opportunity to combine my love for art and typography with this sort of mathematical rigor and this opportunity came up to like, hey, why don't, instead of just doing the thing that I assume everyone needs to do is, pursue design and see this as an opportunity to be both analytical but also creative at the same time.
Great. And I'll pull the note that if you're interested in typography episodes, one of our most popular episodes is with Eric Speakerman.
Oh,
Um,
and I can vouch for it. That was the one episode I listened before jumping on, and it's a great one.
awesome. Question four. What does your future look like?
If I knew the question, or if I knew the answer to that question, Thomas, I would not be here. I would be in the future. But maybe to give more of an answer than just a non-answer, honestly, I'm not as interested in the distant future as I am right now. I could very well wake up tomorrow and get hit by a bus or choke on a chicken finger on my afternoon break this afternoon. So yeah, I've long sort of had, life goals and all these things, but really just at a stage in my career now that I'm trying to enjoy the here and the now rather than being stuck in the future.
Great. Number five, we say is unique to the show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, I think it's something that's increasingly not important and increasingly super important at the same time. And I say not important because I think, if anything, the pandemic has showed us that people can collaborate and create amazing work, irregardless of where they are in the world. So I've always said that I'd love to put designers on projects based on their talents and their skills and their curiosity rather than on their geography. So a lot of the time at Rethink, we have, offices in Vancouver and Toronto, Montreal, and New York, but we'll get people from any of those offices on opportunities that fall into their sweet spot rather than saying, oh, this needs to be just in office XYZ because that's the address or the PO box that that person has. So I think in that sense, location doesn't really matter that much anymore. But at the same time, we are physical beings, and I'd be a fool not to admit that location is super important. And for me, I think location sometimes is the water that I swim in, and it's something that I'm um, oblivious to at times. So being in Vancouver on the West Coast, yeah, just having, a- I'd say, more of a low-key approach to work, where it's a relaxed attitude. Work's still super important when you strive to do great work, but it tends to be less of that like go, 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 drive till midnight sort of thing that you find in or other epicenters of creativity like New York or in Toronto. So that's something that yeah, don't take for granted and really appreciate being able to have that work-life balance. And, as silly as it might sound, being able to rollerblade to work all year round, just afforded by the weather. So yeah, location is super important in that regard.
Great. And so let's start from the beginning. What advice would you give your former younger self?
Yeah, so one of the best pieces of feedback that I ever received that I would wholeheartedly give myself again if I had the opportunity is just to remember that not just your career, but life in general is a marathon, not a sprint. So I think for many creatives coming out, you can't help but see all the amazing work that anyone's ever made constantly being fed to you on, social or on the internet. And it's just probably this giant wall of, how do you even break through that or overcome that? And might feel like you need to, sprint to the finish line and become as good as those people. But in reality, all those people have struggled and had their setbacks and have done work that's not enviable and all those good things. So I think just being reassured that if you trust the process, if you show up every day, if you come up with ideas, they might not always be great, but over time you will improve. You'll make work that you're proud of, and you'll get to collaborate with amazing people that you like working alongside. And yeah, enjoy the process. It's a long one, so buckle up for the ride.
Nice. And seven, what's a day in your life like?
It starts with waking up, eating spaghetti squash, jumping in the shower if I remember to, and then hopping on a computer and yeah, diving into the million different things. Honestly, I've always had a really hard time answering questions like this from people who are like, "Oh, what's the average day like for you?" And sort of at 1,000 feet, it'd be on a computer a bunch, jumping in my sketchbook, drawing ideas. But really, these days, it's really boils down to that earlier answer of just trying to empower other people to create work that they never dreamed possible. So
Mm.
sometimes that's one-on-one conversations. That's sometimes, reviewing work and pushing people in certain directions. Or in other times it's just, doing the mundane things that aren't celebrated, like, organizing spreadsheets of who to hire and, where's the next job gonna come from. So it's a mix of different things, but at the end of the day, it's all in service of, yeah, helping others do great work.
Great. And eight is around lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Yeah, it's another great question. And I think staying up to date is really just keeping tabs on the things that you find interesting.
Mm.
Um, a lot of times there's conversations in our agency around people who aren't necessarily creative, who are maybe in the account side or in production. They're always saying things like, "Oh, if only I could spend X amount of hours every week looking at such and such a blog to know all the advertising stuff." And I've always found that a bit disingenuous because it's not about forcing yourself to all of a sudden become interested in something that you're not. Just like find things that you love, stay on top of them, and it'll naturally flow. So for me, things like branding or typography, those come naturally. It's just, things as specific as brand new. That's a blog I love to follow. Or even just, having my eyes open when I go outside to look at what's the world doing, what does typography look like around me, or those are equally sources of inspiration rather than just internet and websites and all that good stuff. And again, alluding back to one of those earlier questions around just like the answer of one of my superpowers being the stupidest person in the room. I think just approaching things with that that desire to learn and to grow has always been helpful. So, picking up an instrument if you have no idea what music is, or, trying a different program for the first time. I recently just learned how to use GitHub, and I've already forgotten how to use it because it was so confusing, but just going through that process opened my eyes to a lot of different things that I wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to.
Cool. And more on that, tools. Can you talk about digital and analog tools?
Yeah, I think if you were to ask me what's the number one important tool, I'd say your brain. And then second to that only would be your hand in a sketchbook.
Mm.
And I don't mean like you need to be able to sketch photorealistically and know how to shade and crosshatch and all that good stuff. And honestly, I spent way too many hours in art school learning to do those things. And yeah, now it's literally like, can you hold a Sharpie in a fist and sketch an idea really quickly to help articulate your thoughts? And those two tools, your brain and your hand, in some form of drawing, is honestly all you need to articulate great ideas. And then beyond that, it's really, what's the right tool for the job? And there's no shortage of great tools. All sorts of things popping up now, like Figma or Miro, or all these new collaborative tools, but then other, the whole Adobe suite and whatnot. But ultimately, tools are just the means by which you help ideas come to life. And if you don't have a great idea in the first place, then no tool is going to help you come up with one.
Great. And halfway number 10, how do you deal with work life or life work balance?
Yeah, I think it's probably something that might be not unique to everyone, or like not available to everyone, but I'm very fortunate to work in an agency that really celebrates work-life balance and champions the idea that, for a creative to be at their best, they need to have a fulfilling life outside of work. And so I think, yeah, honestly, being in a place that allows that to be a thing, empowers me to do that, is super freeing. And yeah, if you're at a place that only sees you as a cog and wants you chained to your desk for a certain number of hours and expects more of your life than they're willing for you to experience outside of work, then I'd say it's a pretty clear sign for you to find somewhere else to be a part of.
Great. And if you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
I often joke that I would probably be a professional Tupperware organizer.
What would you not like to do with your career?
Uh, the other day I was thinking about, since there's upcoming elections, I was very thankful that I'm not a politician. And at the same time, as much as politicians and government get a lot of hate, I was very thankful that someone was willing to do the job that I would never want to do.
Nice. And do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Um, I don't, but I did read this question ahead of time, so I had to think about it. And honestly, I'm reading a book. The title escapes me, but it's essentially, it's coming from a lady in her 50s who's talking about just this stagnation that a lot of people feel in their middle age. And one of the words that she's used in her vocabulary and even in her self-talk is this word yet. So if you ever feel like, oh, like I'm not good at X, or like I'm not good at typography, or I'm not good at branding, or there's no way that I'll ever, be creatively amazing, just insert the word yet. And that'll change your whole perspective from going, I'll never do this, to I just haven't achieved this yet. So something like I'll never, you know, create award-winning work yet frees you to that idea. Okay, what are the steps that are going to help me get there, rather than it just kind of being this very black and white certainty that you're never going to accomplish. Just, yeah, opens you up to the freedoms of going after goals that you might not think possible currently.
Nice. So 14 is, do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Um, I've never been a fan of being told that things can't be done a certain way. So when people say you can't blank, like, oh, this, to make it work specific would be something along the lines of, oh, we're trying to promote something from a brand, but you can't do this. And I'd always go, well, why not? And try to dig into that. And more often than not, trying to find ways to circumvent that can't and flip it on its head, it actually is what produces great work. So yeah, just this kind of rigidity around you can't do a certain thing for, honestly, most of the time it's just dumb reasons, is what tends to get me quite frustrated.
Nice. And you're choosing one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
Often the word plus a laugh would be robotic, but that's maybe more alluding to my very deadpan monotone voice. Hopefully everyone's enjoying it so far in the podcast. But no, I think it's kind of a humorous. Just yeah, I tend to be fairly calculated and humorously robotic. So it's both the cold precision of a robot, but then also the stupidity of the robot dance.
What keeps you up at night?
Nothing. Thankfully, I sleep great.
Do you have a dream you're chasing?
Um, Honestly, if there is one, I'm not consciously aware of it. I think right now I'm at that stage where a lot of my career up until this point was striving after certain things. Like, if only I could work at such and such an agency or win such and such award or do that kind of work or achieve this kind of status or get that kind of job title. And for anyone who's in that stage of their careers chasing after something, I think the brutally honest answer is it's never going to be enough. As soon as you achieve that thing that you're chasing after, you will want the next thing. So yeah, just trying to find contentment in what you currently have is my biggest piece of advice to you if you're feeling that way. So the dream right now is just yeah, finding contentment in what I'm currently living.
Great. And last few here. What inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, what doesn't inspire me? I've often joked that I am maybe drawn to the super mundane things in life. Like just staring at, the tags on towels when I'm in the washroom, like, oh, those are kind of cool symbols that I never really thought about, can inspire me as much as anything else in the world. So yeah, it depends on the context, but really it's everything from music to other people's work to things my kids say to mistakes that I make. It's all inspiring and can be inspiration if you look at it the right way.
Nice. And any advice you'd like to share?
My advice for anyone who's gotten this far is you could probably glean as much wisdom from this podcast if you listen to it at 1.5 speed.
Nice. And finally, number 20. How can our listeners keep tabs on you? And what's our call to action?
Yeah, so keeping tabs on me, I'm a fairly elusive guy when it comes to the internet, but you can follow Rethink at rethinkideas.com or check us out on LinkedIn. There's a variety of different people who are much smarter than me from Rethink that you should follow. And the call to action is honestly, I'll try to make it a simple and more profound one than just work. But if there's any answer that kind of came to me a few times in this podcast, it was just, yeah, be happy with what you've got. And if you're feeling stuck, don't worry, because showing up and trying is the first step to getting unstuck, and you'll get through it in no time.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining. Kind of ruminating on this and thinking of kind of who's who in the Vancouver creative scene is something that seems achievable now. So thank you so much for joining.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Thomas. And I will say a huge appreciation for the structure and the rigor that you've had in this podcast. I think that was one thing that really excited me about this is just the approach that you've had with all the other people on the podcast and made it much more approachable and easy for me to jump into. So appreciate it.
Thanks. If you liked today's podcast, I encourage you to have a listen to other episodes. You can easily find them at uniqueways.ca or wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us on social media. And thank you. It's you that makes these great, and it's you who these are for. Stay tuned for more unique ways.